Take on Tech, a program that comes to you on KBC Channel 1 every week, and it brings you technological concepts which are broken down by a panel of experts so that you can understand how they relate to you. In today's program, we are going to be looking at 5G. There are so many theories and myths that have been advanced about 5G and its relationship to the current situation. But how true is that? And what exactly is 5G? To help us understand this program and this topic, we have two experts. We have John Walubengo, who is a lecturer at Multimedia University. And John Walubengo is joined by Dr. Bello Musa, who is the Director of Innovation and ICT Strategies at Huawei Southern Africa. Welcome to the program, gentlemen. Now,
Thank you.
To take us through this topic, we straight away go to Walubengo. Walubengo, can you please tell us what 5G is all about?
Okay, thank you, Gigi. 5G is a technology, mobile technology that is the latest edition of what started way back in the 70s, communication through mobile handsets. So we've gone through several generations. First generation, that is what they called 1G, then second generation, third generation, fourth generation, and most recently this year, we're beginning to hear about 5G. So the difference between 5G and what we have previously had in form of either 4G, 3G, or what is widely deployed in the rural area, 2G, is basically in three forms. 5G has better speeds, meaning that users are able to access multimedia services that are more of a better quality. So for example, if you're downloading big images on 4G or 3G, you would take a much longer time. Where you would take 15 minutes to download something, with 5G, you'll probably take 2 minutes. So that is the benefit of 5G. It gives you faster speeds. The other benefit of 5G is that it is able to handle what we call Internet of Things. These are machines that are able to talk to each other to access or to address certain use cases. Internet of Things could include things like smart meters, whereby instead of the person who comes to read your water meter every month or your electricity meter every month, you install an IoT device to be reading your consumption and sending the signal or the message back to the utility company. So these types of smart meters are available even today on 3G and 4G, but with 5G, they are more efficient. They find space, or they find a platform that is designed for those types of things, because smart meters could run into many millions in a very small space. So 5G technology is able to handle those many huge number of devices in a given radius. The third benefit of 5G, if I may conclude, is something to do with what we call better latency, the turnaround time. If you're a user and you send a request to the internet, the time period between when you send and when you get a feedback is much better on 5G. What this translates to is, for example, in self-driving cars. You can imagine a self-driving car has to make decisions that require instant reaction. If the car has to brake, the signal to brake once issued must be translated into action instantly in the shortest time possible. So that has to do with latency. So 5G provides good latency for allowing those types of use cases. Another one that requires short latencies is remote surgery, for example, where you could have doctors in India doing heart surgeries in Kenyatta National Hospital. So you can imagine the doctor who is located 5,000 miles away is operating on a patient in Nairobi. So when they do something on their screen in form of cutting a particular aspect of the heart, that command from India must instantly be communicated and effected in Nairobi.
Oh, thank you
Gigi.
thank you so much, Walubengo, for explaining about that. And you talked about the fact that we already have 4G, which is already performing some of the services that you talked about. Now, Dr. Musa, you being the Director of Innovation at Huawei and knowing that Huawei is very big on 5G, could you please tell us what is the current 5G coverage in Africa and in Kenya, and what is the expected growth?
Yes, Gigi, thank you so much. Yes, of course, Africa is not left behind during this revolution, as I would say. We have also embarked into the 5G deployment. So currently in Africa, we have a few live networks which are operating, but most of the networks are still on the trials. And of course, one of the question would be, what is why the other part of the world are moving very fast in deploying 5G, such as Asia, European countries, and many in America? Why Africa is still lagging? So here the answer could be on twofold. First of all, we need a kind of preparedness. So operators need to get ready to deploy this technology. And one of the requirements to deploy 5G is the availability of spectrum. Huge amount of spectrum will be required for operators to deploy 5G, which is taking some time to kick off in Africa. But the technology is ready. Standards has been frozen, and the other aspect of the 5G deployment is, of course, into the adoption. Before we get ready to use 5G, we need to have a 5G ecosystems, which will include the especially the devices, the terminal. So for now, these terminals are existing, but the cost is still a bit higher. So we believe that as time goes by with the technology maturity, both the spectrum challenging and device challenges will all be uplifted, and we'll also see a huge adoption of 5G deployment in Africa.
Okay, I'll still give you a follow-up question because you have touched on the issue of devices. Would you tell us what would be the implications of 5G for mobile handsets that are already using 4G, and are they compatible with 5G?
Yes.
Dr. Musa.
Well, as Professor John mentioned, 5G application will be much, much broader. We are looking into the IoT type of application. So during the 5G era, the 5G device could be everything. It could be the glasses that I'm wearing. That could be one of the 5G devices. It could be a chair in your house. It could be a bisturi in a surgery room in the hospitals. It could be, as Professor mentioned, a water meter or a gas meter or electricity meter. So the size, the form of the devices will vary greatly, and the price will depend on the size or the application of the device. This device could be just a simple, tiny chips that we will put inside our watches or our glasses or even on our suit, or it could be a huge, a big computer. But as far as the handset is concerned, even right now, as we're talking, many of the mainstream handset manufacturers already support 5G. But of course, the price will be a bit higher compared to 4G's devices. And because 5G network will be different, so definitely the 4G current 4G 3G devices may not be compatible with the 5G devices. For instance, we are looking for new type of authentication during 5G. We may not use the traditional SIM card that we know today to identify a subscriber. It could be something like a software-enabled SIM or something like that. So when those devices will proliferate the market, and when the 5G network will also be on a much larger scale, we will see a lot of changes. But again, I would like to catch this opportunity to say that 5G itself has two standards. There is what we call the non-standalone standard, which will be working together with the existing 4G network. And at the later stage, we will have what we call the 5G standalone network. So that 5G will work separately from the 4G network. So during this transitional period, the idea is to try to make the much use of existing 4G network and 4G infrastructure to deploy 5G. Yes, back to you, Gigi.
Okay. I will come back to you later because you have talked about the fact that some of the current devices that we have may be incompatible with 5G. And of course, that will imply a cost implication. So I'll come back to that so that you can give us a cost implication. I'll go to Walubengo. Walubengo, you've heard what Dr. Musa has said, that 5G might require some chip that you can put in your glasses, some chip you can put in your jacket. And as somebody who works in a university and conducts research, are there dangers of 5G to the population?
This is getting closer to whether Corona started 5G. But what I can say is that whenever a new technology is, published or brought to commercial use, ITU always carries out, research on the risks and benefits. So they did that for 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G. Every technology has some risks, that's for sure. But by the time that technology is approved and declared usable by the communities, it means that they have looked at the risks, they have mitigated the same if it's about reducing the power output of devices, if it's about making sure that the spectrum in use is within the humanly acceptable range, that has been done. So what I can say is that the risks have already been sorted out. Most people, for example, would fear, even in 3G days, they would fear receiving calls, thinking that if you receive a call in a certain way, it will expose you more than if you received it in a different way. But all those are just what you may call exaggerated myths. People look at a particular risk and then they exaggerate it for different reasons, whether they are conspiracy theories or whatever it may be. 5G is not risky, or should we say the risk level of 5G is the same risk level we have faced with 4G, with 3G, and we've used these GSM technologies for over 20 years. So in short, don't be scared. Let's move on and adopt these technologies. Thank you.
All right. A follow-up question for you, Walubengo. So what you're saying is that the International Telecommunications Union has tested 5G.
Yeah.
Can you
Yes.
confirm that there is no harm in terms of the radiation from 5G?
The radiation, the negative effects of radiation, if at all, have been mitigated against. What this means is that by the time the standard is published, the equipment manufacturers have been given specifications within which they should build the base stations, within which they should build the handsets, within which they should build, the masts. All those are predefined with a keen mind on the health of the user. So there is no way that the standard will be published in such a way that it becomes, or it has negative impacts of the user. That's not how IT would release a standard. So I can confirm that there is absolutely no harm with 5G or 4G. Thank you.
Dr. Musa, we come to you now, and back to
Yes.
the issue of costs. So, what are the cost implications of rolling out 5G, and are African countries prepared for this, or what will it mean for a country like Kenya and its budget allocation to rolling out 5G?
Yes. This is a very, very good question. Well, in the 5G era, let me start by this. We will see a new, different approach in deploying 5G network. So the 5G network will not longer be the traditional network that we know now for 3G, 4G, that is owned by a certain type of entity that we call operators. So during the 5G era, of course, operators will be able to deploy this 5G network, but we will also see a lot of private 5G networks deployment, because something that we need to emphasize during for 5G is 5G is built to cater to industry, to verticals, as Professor Walu mentioned. You will have a lot of application in automotive, in healthcare, in manufacturing, in mining, in smart cities. So all this network will be very specific. A network which will be deployed for remote surgery will not be the same network who will be deployed in the automotive manufacturing plant. So we'll see different requirements on 5G. Of course, this will be integrated in the cost. So the cost of 5G could be divided into different groups. First, we will have the cost of acquiring a spectrum, and the cost of deploying the network, and of course the cost involved in operating that network. For now, we cannot estimate how much this will be, because it depends on the network scale and the applications. But what I know is at the initial stage of 5G network deployment, both manufacturers, vendors, will try to reuse the existing infrastructure, like the infrastructure for 4G existing one, so that all this will be used, and this will greatly reduce the cost of 5G deployment. And on the second aspect is in many countries today, for example, in South Korea, in China, we have seen governments are involving a lot in subsidizing or in investing into the 5G network.
All right. I think you went a bit, there was some
Hello?
bit of hanging there, but we are back and we can see you. Walubengo, just taking it up
Yes.
from where Dr. Musa has left,
Yeah.
would you tell us what are some of the potential privacy or data abuse that may be associated with 5G?
Okay, before I answer that, just a clarification. Dr. Musa keeps calling me a professor. I'm working on it. I will be a professor one day, but not yet. Now, to your question on privacy issues, I would say that the privacy aspects of 5G are more or less the same as those we have in 3G and 4G, to the extent that the user privacy will depend a lot on how the operator is observing or is compliant to the Data Privacy or to the Data Protection Act that was published last year. So if you get an operator that is not following those laid down expectations in the act, then you start exposing your users to data privacy breaches. Perhaps I will also say, because Daktari here mentioned that 5G will be slightly different from at the deployment stage, in the sense that, yes, you still have big players like Safaricom acting as operators, but within that framework, what this means is that Safaricom would, for example, allow a smaller operator who is specialized in IoT deployment to ride on its 5G platform. So in that regard, Safaricom will not be in charge of the privacy issues that this smaller operator has with its own customers. So this new breed of operators that will come in to play within the 5G space, whether it's with respect to IoTs, will need to be carefully monitored because they don't have a track record. They don't have the same track record like Safaricom has built over the last 15 years with regards to subscriber privacy. So from that point of view, it is possible that 5G could present new dimensions or new challenges when it comes to data privacy, because you have new players jumping into the 5G space to offer new services that probably have privacy issues not yet sorted out. Hopefully by then, when 5G becomes widely deployed, the government will have appointed the data commissioner to make sure that as the technology gets widely used, the privacy concerns are also moving in tandem, and there's somebody keeping an eye on the citizen privacy. Back to you, Gigi.
Talking of that, you hope that the government will have appointed a data protection commissioner.
Yeah.
Is this country prepared for such emerging laws that 5G technology, that some challenges may be presented by 5G technology? So is this country prepared with such laws?
Not yet. I wouldn't say so, because the data protection law is new, And the biggest challenge is actually not from the operators. The biggest challenge is from the citizens. The citizens do not even know their rights. They don't know their what we call data subject rights. So they don't know, for example, that they have a right to consent before a service provider, whether it's an e-commerce platform, tries to sell you something. They should have a framework for reaching out to you and asking whether you are willing to subscribe. The citizens don't even know that they can withdraw that right. Citizens don't know they have a right to be forgotten. There are so many rights that are prescribed in the Data Protection Act that the operators are aware of, but take advantage because the citizens are not aware. So the first thing that the data commissioner needs to do is massive capacity building at a grassroots level, so that you bring everybody to the same level as regards to what their rights are. Once the citizens are, aware, then they automatically become the first point of protection. But as long as they are ignorant of their rights, the new players in the 5G space that will come on the scene uh, can really get away with murder, so to speak, when it comes to data privacy. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Walu. Dr. Musa,
Yes.
when do you expect 5G, or should I put it, what is your projection of when 5G will be fully adopted in Africa and in Kenya? And I am asking you this as as somebody who is already working on that technology and looking at how it will be used by the populations in the world.
Yes. According to our previsions, we believe that by 2025, 5G will really have a very, very good acceptable coverage in Africa. 2025, 5 years from now. Because right now we already have operators who have deployed 5G and commercially launched 5G with subscriber on it, and with the different type of terminal, mainly the dongles or CPEs for fixed wireless access. So in the 4 years time, I believe the network will be more mature, the devices will be more available, and the wide adoption will also happen in Africa. So in 4 years time. Kenya is the same. Maybe Kenya would go very faster than Africa. There is this old saying that saying in Africa that Kenya leads and Africa follows. So right now, there have been a lot of progress in the spectrums allocation for 5G spectrum allocation in Kenya, and I believe operators like Safaricom are just waiting for that to start deploying 5G commercially, because right now there are certain trials going on in Kenya. So I believe Kenya will be faster than other countries in Africa.
Okay, and have you thought of how you're going to deal with the challenges? I think Walubengo did at some point, say some of the myths and theories that have been advanced about 5G. And have you thought of how you're going to combat these myths and allow for buy-in and adoption?
Yes, we are working hand in hand with academic, communities, try to educate, the citizens, to tell them that listen, because this is the issue of education, and of course some conspiracy theories. But we are working hand in hands with people on the field, on the ground, to sensibilize the population, to tell them, no, listen, 5G is not harmful. It's just a technology. It has nothing to do with the COVID-19 or so or whatsoever. And in terms of the radiation of 5G, when you look at it, is nothing compared to what we are exposed to every day in our daily life. So our fridges, our micro ovens, our light bulbs, they radiate a much higher energy than the 5G. So if those are not harmful, why 5G will be harmful? And even the spectrum that 5G will be mainly deployed on, which is the C-band, which is the spectrum around 3.5 gig, is also the same spectrum that is used for Wi-Fi. So if Wi-Fi never kill you, how would 5G does that? So these are the kind of action that we are taking. But in short, it comes to education. We really need to spend a lot of time educating people and making people be aware of the technology behind 5G.
All right, we are about to close the program, Take on Tech, and I'm going to give you now a chance for closing remarks. Walubengo, you can give us closing remarks on this topic.
Thank you, Gigi. I think as my closing remarks, I will just say that for Kenya to actually leverage on 5G, there are a couple of things that the regulator should do to facilitate that progression. The first thing that comes to mind is to ensure that the way they will allocate spectrum, to the various operators is open and transparent, because there are cases where people bid and get these frequency spaces, but they get them as for speculative purposes, and they don't really they're not the ones who eventually deploy the network. So the way the spectrum will be allocated needs to be transparent. The other thing, I think, from the regulatory point of view, is they need to have a conversation around IPv6. I know way back in 2010, the former PS for ICT, Professor Ndemo now, had an IPv6 task force, but I think at that time it was ahead of its time. It died a natural death. With 5G, IPv6 is going to be very crucial, because if you're deploying millions of smart devices, and each one of them must have that unique number, the IPv6 plan as a country needs to be quite clearly spelled out. So those two things, if they're addressed, I think we expect a lot of benefit from 5G for Kenyans. Thank you. Back to you, Gigi.
Okay, Dr. Musa, your closing remarks.
Yes, Gigi. For my closing remark, I'll say 5G is a great revolution that have ever happened to the mankind. And as an African, I believe this is the time that we should take advantage of this technology. This is something I believe that if very well managed and organized, will help Africa tremendously. And for this to happen, I think the government has to step in to regularize, to coordinate, and also to give helping hands, not only on the technological aspect, but mainly on the applications and legal aspect of the thing. You see, today, if you look at the whole world, other countries, they have this 5G task force, which is looking into some legal issues, legal matters, as the issue of data privacy, data security. There are many things more that are surrounding this technology. So if the governments in Africa will come to work with academics, with manufacturers, with research institutions to try to come up with some services which will be, or application which will be specific to Africa. I believe we will gain a lot out of this technology. This is what I have to say.
That's it in our topic on debunking 5G. You've listened to two experts unpacking what the topic is all about. And it doesn't matter what myths or theories are advanced, you as the viewer must be guided by facts. And that is what John Walubengo from the Multimedia University and Dr. Bello Musa from Huawei, Southern Africa, have done today. And until next week, my name is Grace Gidaiga. Please join us for another program of Take on Tech.